This is definitely the highest level of robbing an armored car. A man sits by the flower bed, watching the armored car, and keeps describing what's about to happen. Herman gets out of the car and walks into the bank. Felix gets off at the station, where Doris appears and goes up to exchange coins. At this moment, Herman comes over carrying 2 bags of money. The man starts counting down and walks towards them. Just as the 3 of them bend down to pick up the coins, the man easily walks away with a bag of money. How could he be so precise? Actually, just a few days ago, the man, Phil, was an ordinary office worker. He was a weather broadcaster. Every day, besides standing in front of a blue screen to give the audience a humorous weather forecast, every February 2nd, he also had to go to a border town called Punxsutawney to report on the local Groundhog Day. But he didn't like this job, especially hating that annual Groundhog Day. However, tomorrow is February 2nd. He and 2 colleagues drove to the town. One was the driver, Larry, and the other was a new colleague, Lisa. Phil felt this job was too boring and wanted to change jobs. Lisa, however, found it very interesting. Phil even thought most of the audience were idiots. After entering the town, they arrived at the reserved hotel. Phil thought the conditions here were too poor and didn't match his status, so he booked a luxury hotel separately. At 6 o'clock the next morning, Phil woke up to the sound of the alarm clock. The radio was introducing the day's weather. There would be a snowstorm in the evening. Phil opened the window to look outside, got dressed, and left the room. A chubby guy greeted him and asked if it would be an early spring this year. Phil casually replied and walked away. Downstairs, after discussing the weather with an old lady, she asked if he would be checking out tonight. Phil said there was a 10% chance of leaving today. Looking at the beggar by the roadside, Phil pretended to take out money, patted himself, and walked past. At this moment, a man with glasses called out his name. The man with glasses claimed to be his high school classmate and was now working in insurance sales. Phil introduced him to some insurance details. Phil hurriedly found an excuse and walked away. Unexpectedly, he stepped into a puddle, and the man with eyes on his back looked gleeful. Phil didn't say anything. He hurried to the venue to finish today's work. At the festival, it was packed with people. Lisa excitedly introduced the fun there. Phil, however, said, "Shambhala is always like this." As the countdown ended, someone tapped the little yellow door with a cane, and then a groundhog popped out and was placed next to a man's ear. After that, the man began to announce that the groundhog said it had seen its shadow. This means that winter will end in less than 6 weeks. With a mocking tone, Phil casually wrapped up the year's report. Perhaps it was karma. On the way back, it started snowing heavily, and the road ahead was already closed. No matter how much Phil yelled and shouted, it was to no avail, and even the phone was out of service. They had no choice but to return to the small town. He intended to take a hot shower but got drenched with cold water instead. The old lady said there was no hot water supply today. The next morning, Phil noticed something was off. If life were stuck on the same day forever, what would you do? Phil woke up at 6 in the morning, and the weather forecast on the radio was the same as yesterday. Phil complained that they were lazy and played yesterday's tape. However, the more he listened, the more something felt off. He quickly pulled open the curtains, and outside looked exactly the same as yesterday. Phil was a bit surprised, walked out the door, and the same chubby guy asked the same question as yesterday. Phil said, "Didn't you ask this yesterday?" The chubby guy looked confused. Phil angrily pinned him against the wall. "What day is it today, exactly?" The chubby guy said, "It's February 2nd, Groundhog Day." Seeing Phil's serious face, he had to let him go. The old lady talked to him about the same topic again and asked if he was checking out tonight. Phil said there was an 80% chance of leaving today. At the same corner, the same beggar appeared. Then his high school classmate, glasses guy Phil, pushed aside the ordinary classmate and jumped into the puddle again. To prove it wasn't a dream, he asked Lisa to slap him. Lisa didn't hold back, and to verify her own suspicion, she broke a pencil and placed it on the table. At 6 o'clock again, the pencil was intact in the drawer. Phil asked Lisa to meet at a restaurant to talk, but Lisa didn't believe him and suggested he get his head checked at the hospital. So she really went to the hospital, but all the tests came back normal. In the evening, she went to a bar. He got drunk with 2 strangers, and since everything would start over tomorrow, he could do whatever he wanted. So he drove and crashed into a roadside gas tank. When the patrol saw him and chased after him, he wasn't afraid at all. Instead, he provocatively approached them and drove onto the train tracks. The police were chasing him from behind, and just then, a train was coming head-on. At the last moment before the collision, he swerved the steering wheel and deliberately crashed into a roadside groundhog sign. Then he was caught and taken to the police station. However, he wasn't worried or scared. At 46, he woke up in the hotel bed again. He excitedly jumped out of bed, already reciting the weather forecast. Downstairs, after kissing an old lady, he quickly went to the street, greeted a beggar, and gently inquired about an old classmate. Watching others step into a puddle, he laughed. Eating, he no longer worried about high blood pressure, high blood sugar, or high cholesterol. He ate whatever he wanted, and when he saw a beautiful woman, he approached her and asked for her name and school. The next day, at the Groundhog Day festival, Phil found the woman from yesterday, called out her name, and said she was his high school deskmate. He left the woman utterly bewildered, and by the end of the day, he had won her over. Next, he had an even bigger idea. He wanted to win over a truly genuine woman. Since ancient times, money has been the ultimate tool for wooing women. So he set his sights on the armored truck. After familiarizing himself with everything happening around the truck, he easily walked up and took a big bag of money. Then he bought a Rolls-Royce and got himself a new outfit. Just like that, he won over a truly genuine girl. Next, he wanted to challenge himself with his new colleague, Lisa, who was even more difficult. After experiencing the same day over and over, Phil remembered many of Lisa's preferences. What she liked to eat, drink, and play, and knowing that Lisa's college major was French poetry, he casually spoke a few sentences in French. Lisa immediately felt like she had found a soulmate. Then the two of them built a snowman together, had a snowball fight with the kids in town, and danced under the gazebo. But when Phil tried to take the final step, Lisa was very resistant. She felt that a day's time was too short, but Phil couldn't wait, and Lisa suddenly felt something was off. It all seemed deliberately arranged, like Phil had set it all up. It ended with a slap. No matter how many times Phil tried, the result was always the same. This man was so unlucky every time he tried with the goddess. Going further, the result is that he is stuck on February 2nd. On this day, the goddess can't handle his life, as if she's lost direction. Phil feels this life is too boring, starting each day with watching the same repetitive TV shows, half-heartedly doing the report count, and even smashing the alarm clock to pieces in the morning. Phil is a bit desperate, blaming the wretched groundhog for his plight, and decides to go down with it. So, he drives his car straight off a cliff, resulting in a massive explosion. To escape this predicament, he tries various ways to die. Electrocution in the bathtub, getting hit by a car, jumping off a tall building. But each time, the result is the same. He tells Lisa that she is a god, getting hit by a car, stabbed, shot, poisoned, no matter what, she just can't die. To prove his point, Phil introduces Lisa to everyone in the restaurant, accurately stating their names, preferences, and experiences, and during his speech, a waiter drops a plate. Afterwards, Lisa finally starts to believe him a little. Then, Phil reveals some secrets about Lisa that she rarely shares with others, predicts the driver will come to call them to leave, and even writes down what the driver will say in advance. This time, Lisa finally believes him. To verify Phil's words, she stays by his side overnight, but when he wakes up at 6 the next morning, Lisa is gone. This time, she plans to live differently, warmly greeting the chubby guy, giving lots of money to a beggar, hugging an old classmate, taking time to read, learning piano from a teacher, and even studying ice sculpting. In the evening, he sees the beggar feeling unwell, and after taking him to the hospital, the beggar passes away. The next day, he invites the beggar for a hot meal, but still can't prevent his fate of passing away. That day, as soon as the report ends, he quickly leaves the scene. In the park, he catches a falling child, helps a pregnant old lady, changes a tire, and assists an elderly man choking. In the evening, Phil plays the piano at the town dance. This surprises Lisa greatly, as she didn't expect him to have this skill. At the dance, everyone comes forward to thank him for his help today. This makes Lisa even more puzzled. Aren't you only here once a year? At the bachelor auction, Phil is pushed onto the stage, starting at a bid of $5, and it goes up until Lisa spends all her money, $39.80, on Phil. He made a statue, which deeply moved Lisa. The two couldn't help but kiss each other. At that moment, it started snowing heavily. The next day, at 6 o'clock, the alarm went off again. Lisa reached out to turn it off because she didn't want to get up so early. Phil was very surprised. "Why are you here?" "Because I bought you yesterday." Phil couldn't believe it and went to the window to check. Outside, everything was indeed different. The loop finally disappeared. From then on, the two lived a happy life without rest. The movie, Groundhog Day, ends here. Phil woke up every day on the same day, just like our daily lives. Going to work, coming home, eating, sleeping, living a life without any change. During this process, we can be troubled and negative, or we can face it positively. How you face life is how life will reward you. After Phil faced life positively, he and Lisa got together and broke the time loop. This story tells us that if you really encounter a time loop, then seize the time to woo someone. Anyway, I'm off to find out how to get into a time loop. Alright, if you want to see more great movie explanations, please follow me. Bye bye. Yeah.